DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. And today we have a long-distance musher calling in. Her name is Susannah Tuminelli, and she's originally from Massachusetts, and she's up in Alaska for the last couple of years training to do Iditarod. Susannah, how's it going today?
It's going great, thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. Can you do our listeners a favor and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Susannah Tuminelli. I go by Suze for those that are close to me. That's what everybody knows me as. But so I identify as a dog musher. I am working for Kathleen Frederick and the Shameless Huskies. So Kathleen's a pretty awesome woman. She's kind of taken me under her wing here in Alaska. So I work for her. I work with her dogs. I've got 31 here that I live with and train. So kind of our agreement is I'm able to help her get ready for races and for her serum run, which is going to be kind of commemorating the original serum run from Nenana to Nome this coming March. So helping her get geared up for that and also keeping the dogs trained up for that journey. And then I, in turn, get to work with these guys and race them myself as well.
So, Susannah, you had mentioned that you're originally from Massachusetts, Plymouth, Massachusetts, I think you said. How did you get involved with sled dogs? I know you moved up here to do sort of the tour deal, the Icefield expeditions, but did you know much about dog mushing and whatnot living on the East Coast there?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story how I got into it. So I didn't honestly know the first thing about sled dogs or really Iditarod growing up in Massachusetts. It's just kind of this little known phenomenon. It's like sort of this thing that happens on Mars to a lot of people out there, I think myself included, as a kid. But I've always been attracted to cold places. I went to school in Vermont. And actually graduated in 2015, decided I wanted to do something a little bit different, didn't want to go for an office job, quote unquote, right away. So I ended up in Montana doing some trail work for a couple of years there, wanted to find something to do for the winter time. And so that's how I ended up into dog mushing. So I moved to northern Minnesota it was late 2015, 16. And I started working with a retirement kennel. So they're called the Chili Dogs, based out of Ely, Minnesota, and I worked with them and a high-adventure Boy Scout base, Northern Tier. So we'd lead multi-day expeditions with scouts, teach them how to cold weather camp and how to mush their own small 6-dog team. So I did that for 2 seasons, and then kind of wanted to get a little bit further into the mushing community, and what better place to do that than Alaska, of course. So ended up getting a job on the Mendenhall Glacier last summer, and haven't left Alaska since.
And it sounds like you're here for a while. You're training for Iditarod. Is that next year or the year following?
Well, that all depends. So, of course, there's a series of qualifying races before you're allowed to sign up for a race such as Iditarod or Yukon Quest. And so I'm set to complete, hopefully, knock on wood, my final qualifier this coming weekend, the Willow 300. So that's my last one, and if all goes according to plan, then I'm hopefully going to sign up for the Iditarod for next year.
Excellent. So I was told about you from Kathleen Frederick. She and I are going on that Serum Run trip together in a few weeks, and she said, you've got to talk to this lady. She has a heck of a story, and at the time you were doing the Copper Basin. So let's talk about that right away. It was a cold one, wasn't it? I guess there was some temperatures about -60 out there.
Yeah, it was by far the coldest I've ever experienced. Being in Alaska, I've experienced 40 below, and even in northern Minnesota, a pretty surprisingly cold place. But yeah, -60 takes the cake. That was a pretty darn cold race for sure.
So growing up on the East Coast, and I assume being a somewhat of a city gal out that way, how did you prepare yourself for something like that? Because that is something that most people in this world don't get the chance to experience.
Totally. And so, of course, like all mushers in such a race, and honestly, this was a pretty low finishing field in terms of how many people actually signed up for the race. And I was intimidated going into it, just knowing it is kind of known for its extremely technical trails. It's a challenging race. Of course, it is 300 miles. So that, aside from the weather forecast, kind of had me on my first alert, so to speak. But I have to honestly credit the folks I worked with in northern Minnesota for a lot of what really kept me safe out there. So I did a lot of intense, like military-style cold weather camping there. So we'd be out for multiple days at a time with no place to go in and warm up. So I was relying on a lot of cold weather wilderness survival at this point, because when it gets that cold, you have to make the right decisions. If you mess up, if you make a mistake, not only are you risking your life, of course, but you are risking dogs. So it was really important to me to stay focused out there and do what I could to protect them against the elements as well.
So I have a bunch of questions here, Susannah, concerning everything you just said, and I don't know exactly where to start, but first off, I guess start off by being a handler for somebody else. So, when you go into this with your own dogs, you sort of make your own decisions, and you can decide whether you want to scratch or whatnot. But when you're working with somebody else, there is multiple people making the decisions going into the race and potentially during the race, et cetera, et cetera. How much play did you get with that? How much did your word count, I guess, being sort of part of a team versus having your own dogs and all that?
Yeah, totally. And so, Kathy at this point is now not only my employer and owner of the wonderful dogs I get to train with, but she's become a really great mentor and friend. So I'm very lucky to work with her in the capacity that I think a lot of dog owners and, someone who has their own racing team is going to be, of course, extra protective, want to make the right choices regarding the dogs. But I'm very grateful to her. She has placed a lot of trust and faith in myself and my boyfriend, Adam. We work together with the dogs here. And so she pretty much let me run with it. She had, I guess, a lot of faith in me out there. And we had talked a lot going into the race about, various things to kind of be aware of, to watch out for the dogs. So definitely grateful to her for her advice, because she does value taking good care of dogs, especially in those temperatures for sure.
So the next question has to be about being a rookie in that field. And I know a heck of a lot of mushers scratched or withdrew just pretty much right up until the start. And a lot of them were claiming, hey, it's too cold, or we're going to do other races, et cetera, et cetera. How did it feel to be out there with some of those, who's who of mushing, Nick Pettit and, all of those guys that have been doing this for years?
Yeah, totally. So first and foremost, whenever I'm in a race that's got like such a competitive field, such as the Copper Basin, I have to like choke back the fangirl in me a little bit. Just for example, Allie Zirkle is like one of my mushing heroes, and she like passed me pretty early on in the race. I never got up to her, never saw her again. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing being actually like considered in the competition with those guys. So. Of course, you know, I'm a rookie. I was using this as a qualifier, so I'm not making any insane moves, especially right out the gate. I ran really conservatively on purpose, especially towards the beginning, because my main goal there was to keep dogs safe, especially with the cold, and just to finish. But yeah, it's always a really great thing to be able to watch other people who have been doing this for years and years, who are really at the top of their field. I try to watch and learn as much as I can while I'm out there.
So the next question goes to the dogs, and I'm sure we will get a bunch of questions on the comment section about, wow, was it too cold for the dogs out there? And we've said on this show many times, and I've been doing dog sledding for many years, and I always say that sort of that optimal temperature for sled dogs is about 10 above to about 10 below. You were way below that. How did your dog fare during that? In particular, how did your male dogs fare with, with their private parts and all of that, being exposed to that cold of temperatures?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And that is, for a very good reason why I think a lot of folks did decide not to do it. So you're worried about a couple of things in those kinds of temperatures. So primarily, of course, you are worried about frostbite in particular, as you mentioned, for the males in their private parts. They just don't have kind of the same hair protection a lot of times down there. And you're also worried, too, about just the expenditure of energy it takes to function and to perform at such cold temperatures. Their metabolisms just really ramp up, so they're burning calories even faster than they normally would. So if, someone has signed up, say, for a long distance race like Iditarod or Yukon Quest, maybe even both coming up, I would totally understand and respect someone's decision, like a lot of folks did, which was to just drop out and say, it's a little bit too cold to kind of take those risks. But so for myself and those that did end up competing in the race and finishing, there's a couple of things you have to be thinking about. And honestly, for me, I went in with this approach of I will stop as many times as I need to on trail, which is typically not something I do. I try to kind of keep the train moving. But I stopped a lot to fix protectors that we have on our dogs. So foxtails are really common. I usually run with 2 of them in front of the dogs, especially the male's private parts. When it's that cold, they all have coats, they all have boots. So it's a lot of constant maintenance, constant checking. I was stopping and checking everybody's, areas that were a little bit more prone to frostbite pretty much every hour, and staying on top of it, using the vets at each checkpoint. And I'm happy to say I had a 0 frostbite miraculously on that race for any of the dogs.
And did you fare as well yourself with getting away without any frostbite?
Well, I got a little bit on my hands and on my face. It was pretty mild stuff, a little bit of blistering and whatnot. But, nothing severe, thankfully.
Excellent. So you had said that you're training for Iditarod hopefully in 2021, and you're going to be doing the Willow 300 coming up this next week. We're recording on the 19th of January here. You had also ran in the Percy de Wolf race, which is a mid-distance race in Canada, and the Tustamina 200, which is not a race to sneeze at for sure. I've done that race myself, and there's a heck of a lot of what they call hills, but I think they're mountains, aren't there?
I would agree with you, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough race in of itself, but it's absolutely beautiful country over there. So you're preparing for your next race, and hopefully it'll be much warmer. How does your planning or your strategizing shift from a race like the Copper Basin, which is much different than the Willow 300? What are you thinking about going into this next one?
Totally. So first and foremost, I'm always just trying to take each experience I have, good, bad, whatever, and apply it to my next one moving forward. So copper basin, I was really excited that a lot of things went well, and despite the cold temperatures, the dogs did really good. It was amazing to see all of the hard work and training that, myself, Adam, and Kathy had put into these dogs all season come to play. So if anything, I'm really excited to see what they can do for the Willow 300. I think they just accomplished a really tough race, some pretty challenging conditions. The dogs that were with me, only 2 of them had finished a race that was longer than 200 miles before. And those ones were Iditarod finishers, but everybody else was 2, 3, 4-year-olds that hadn't really done a whole lot of racing. So it was pretty amazing to see them out there and to see them succeed. So with the Willow, it's going to be much, much flatter than the Copper Basin. So the Copper Basin is known for its crazy, intense mountains/hills, a lot of technical trails. The Willow 300, from what I understand, is going to be a lot flatter, a little bit more relaxed in that sense. So hopefully, crossing the fingers, it's going to be a little bit less challenging. But of course, any 300 race is a challenge in it itself, and there's always new things that pop up.
So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company, and now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
So, Susannah, let's talk a little bit about a day in the life, if we can. And each kennel or each mushing team has their own way of doing things when they bring on handlers and or folks that run their bee teams or puppy teams or whatever. And sometimes the handlers don't get to run the dogs at all. Their job is pretty much just to take care of the dogs in the dog yard and all of that. And it sounds like you're on the other side of it, where you're running your own team and making a lot of decisions. Is that what you signed up for, or did you sign up for whatever comes, whatever goes?
Yeah, so, initially when I first met Kathy last year, I was kind of open to anything that would get me into the racing scene, so I was certainly prepared, if I needed to kind of earn my place, so to speak, and, earn my time on the sled for sure. But I was thankful when I met Kathy, because she's got sort of a unique situation. So she still has a full-time job, as of course you know, but she works as a judge, and so she's obviously very busy with all of that, but still loves her dogs, wants them to be well taken care of and trained when she's not able to be out here. And so that's kind of where Adam and I fall in. So we're caretakers, trainers. We do run the dogs pretty much every day. There's a couple of rest days that we'll take here and there, but yeah, we kind of do it all.
So can you tell us what the day in the life of you working with the dogs and just doing everything that you can sort of right now in the middle of a season?
Sure. So we're definitely in our busy time right now. So Kathleen's got the serum run coming up, so she's been really busy getting drop bags together, so her supply drops for all of that. Adam and I have been really busy trying to pack for my 300-mile races. He's set to do some qualifiers coming up too, like the Goose Bay 150. So middle of the season right now, we got a couple things going on. We're, packing for our future races, unpacking from our past races. All the while, we wake up every day and we feed dogs twice, sometimes 3 times a day, especially when it's been so cold. We try to kind of pack in the calories wherever we can for these guys, especially, they're training some pretty high mileage. So you've got to watch out for weight loss when it's getting cold like this. And then, of course, we'll run the dogs. So that's most days. We'll take 1 or 2 teams out. One of us might stay behind and work on stuff around the kennel, whether that's restrawing houses, doing some extra kennel maintenance projects. And with the cold, as I think lots of folks can kind of commiserate with us up here in Willow, is usually there's some pipes breaking or heaters that aren't really turning on. So there's a lot of other like little maintenance things that we're keeping an eye on as well.
So one last question before I ask sort of the same question that I asked all of our guests, and that is, what happens next year if you do, in fact, qualify here coming up with the Willow 300? A lot of times folks like you come up and work with a kennel for that year to qualify, and then either you go somewhere else or, so whatever the chips fall. What are your plans after the season here?
Yeah, so my current plans are to hopefully take these dogs with me actually up to the glacier, Mendenhall Glacier, where I work in Juneau. So trying to keep that continuity going and hopefully get to hang out with my friends for even more time this summer. And then the plan is, of course, to come back and return here to work with Cassie, work with the Shameless Huskies, live and train here in Willow, and hopefully take these guys on Iditarod with me. So the bond that, I've been able to form with these guys is pretty incredible. They are technically not my dogs, but I certainly think of them as that in a lot of respects. I've gotten to spend a lot of valuable sled time with them. We hang out with them inside too. They're our buddies. So I'm really excited to take my friends with me out on Iditarod, hopefully next year.
And you're right. That continuity is so important. And for folks that don't know about working on the glacier, a lot of mushers will send their dogs up there in the off season, where they get to go up there, they get to interact with a lot of other people and get to run every day, and where most of the time the dogs that aren't on glaciers and things, it'll just sort of be like a summer off, like at elementary school or something like that. But it really prepares the dogs well into that next season when they are working pretty much year round. So it's always a great thing to do with sled dogs, and they usually do very well at that. Susannah, we're just about out of time, and like I said, I always ask the same question to all of our guests, and I think I'm already knowing what you're going to talk about, but I'm always interested to hear what you're going to say, and that is, if a person is getting involved in the sport and they're brand new and they have no real goals yet, whether they're going to do, bike joring or Iditarod one day, what would you tell them if they ask you for one piece of advice?
Yeah, for someone getting into dogs, I would say the best bit of advice I can say is honestly swallow your pride, swallow your ego, and ask everyone you can about how they run their dogs. Anything you can learn is going to be valuable. Every musher has their own way of doing things, has new kind of ingenuitive ways that they've figured out to, solve a problem, whether it's training or feeding or whatnot. There's a million ways to do things. And I think the best way to be successful in this sport is to be able to listen and appreciate everybody's advice, and then kind of take different levels of ways to approach that and combine it to find the way that works best for you and for your dogs. I've gotten to where I am because I've bugged people a lot. I've asked people a lot of different questions pretty constantly to try and learn as much as I possibly can.
Great advice for sure. So, Susannah, how can folks follow along and watch your progress on the trail? Are you on Facebook? Does the Shameless Huskies have a page or a website or something you'd like to share?
Yeah, so you can follow the Shameless Huskies adventures. So that's not only myself, but also, of course, Kathleen and Adam. So that's the Shameless Huskies Facebook page. And then I do have my own personal mushing website. So it's alpenglows.wordpress.com, and that's with two S's, so alpenglowss.wordpress.com. You can see links to my personal Facebook page and Instagram there as well. I like to do a lot of live videoing and pictures on the trail and whatnot that I share there.
So for folks listening, we'll make sure we put all of those links over on the show notes. Last thing here, Susannah, before we go, do you have any sponsors, family, friends, anybody you'd like to thank here on the show?
I do, yes. So I've talked a lot about them, but I truly wouldn't have made it out here into the winter time of Alaska and the racing scene without them. So Alaska Icefield Expeditions, I'll be going back there to work for my third consecutive summer. So I have nothing but good things to say about the company, and they have graciously sponsored me this season. So very excited to continue to work with them. And then Kathy, of course, my employer, but also a sponsor of herself, has helped me by providing a ton of gear, all the things that I need to make my qualifiers happen and to go on to do Iditarod. Of course, I got to give a shout out to my parents back home in East Coast Ville in Boston, Massachusetts. They have been extremely supportive throughout my crazy wild dreams to become a dog musher, which, like I said, is sort of like being on Mars for a lot of us back in Massachusetts.
Awesome. Susannah Tuminelli is our guest today here on Mushing Radio. Be sure to check us out over on dogworksradio.com. And if you have any questions or comments for Susannah, be sure to leave them for us on our social channels, just searching for Dogworks Radio. Susannah, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can connect again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you. On behalf of my guest today, Susannah Tuminelli, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio. Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.